Hi, y'all. Thanks for joining in today. We're excited to have all of you with us. My name is Lauren Conaway. I'm the marketing manager here at Principal LED, and I'll be turning it over to Jeff Bassett very shortly to do this training. If you guys have any questions throughout the time today, please make sure you submit those through our questions window, and we will make sure we get to them. We may save them for just a bit while Jeff is in the middle of an explanation, and then we'll get those questions answered for you all. So be sure to get those sent in to us. I know we have just a minute or two before we get started officially. We wanted to go ahead and get on, let people jump in. So please make sure you find that questions window, say hi, let us know you're here, that you're listening, that you can hear us, and we will get started very shortly.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for joining today to do some training on LED Wizard 8. If you've been with me before on one of these trainings or a demo, you may know that I like to start my sessions by thanking everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules. The folks who use our software are always under time pressures to get layouts done, get estimates done, to get jobs moved through the shop. So, obviously now we're in an extraordinary time in our work lives, our personal lives. At work, you might see jobs going through your shop at a lower level than you've seen. So you might not be as busy right now. Growing up in this industry, I've seen downturns, but one thing I know is this industry always comes roaring back, right? And at its heart, the sign industry is an industry of family businesses, right? Families stick together, families get through the hard times. Principal LED is a family business. My company, Aries Graphics, was a family business. We were in business over 30 years in this industry before we got acquired by Principal LED. So, I don't feel like it's a time to be complacent. I don't feel like, it's time to get ready for the next uptick, time to get ready for when this business comes back. We don't know how long that will take, but think about some of the things you can do, work to make your shop more efficient, take a look at your workflow, your procedures, all those things that you never have time to do, right? And a lot of these things you can do remotely. Anyway.
Hey Jeff.
Yeah.
This is Blake. Real quick,
hey,
I just wanted to jump in, and I know we have a lot of our PLED users and partners out there, and I'm going to turn it over to you really quickly and let you do your thing. But I just wanted to, I just walked in here, so I might repeat something you said. I just wanted to say, first of all, I know there's a lot of folks out there that are hurting, and it's tough right now. I mean, we've seen a lot of people with losing their jobs and struggling right now, and our hearts go out to all those folks. we hope everybody that is suffering from any of this virus gets a quick and easy and healthy recovery. And, we're all in this together. It is a family. This whole industry has been great to me and my brother, and we love it. We love it and can't imagine ever doing anything else. So I just wanted to say that, hey, we're thinking about everybody out there, and we're here to support you guys. And just wanted to say thanks for everybody for taking time out of their day to do this. And so I'll turn it back over to Jeff, but thanks to everybody that jumped on this call today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Blake. Yeah, that's I was getting to some of the same points you were bringing up. It's just I hope that we can stick together in this industry and come through as a stronger industry, and that we make it through successfully. So we're doing these LED Wizard training sessions every Wednesday. Certainly, I think investing in training in LED Wizard is a great thing to do during this time. So every Wednesday we're doing this, and I have a schedule for the upcoming webinars here at the end of the presentation. So thanks, and let's get into it. So this is the agenda of what I'll go through today. Today we're talking about PowerFlow, right? And PowerFlow is really the heart of our software, in the sense of the laying out of LEDs, and it's the core of what the software does. So we'll talk about a couple of quick intros. We'll talk about the PowerFlow property bar, the PowerFlow tab, density guidelines, artwork, how to organize your artwork going into the software. Auto population, the auto population tools. We'll talk about module editing, both individual modules and selections of modules. We'll talk about vector guide paths, how to edit vector guide paths and what those are. And then finally, scaling, which is an important part of the new version. So what we're not talking about today is, and some of these are topics coming up, file import, data cleanup, cabinets. We're doing cabinets next week. We won't be talking about power supplies or title blocks or stats or the production edition, but these are all things that in coming weeks that I want to cover. So really today about PowerFlow, which sort of sits in the middle, obviously, of file import and some of this other stuff. Before I do that, I always like to put this graphic up here, because it's a good reminder of where LED Wizard 8 sort of sits in the universe here of layouts and working with principles. So of course we have our easy layout builder is on the PLED website. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with this and have used it. Standard fonts, basic shapes, quick and easy, estimates, gives you a PDF, on and off there in a couple of minutes. LED Wizard 8, which we're talking about today, for both estimates and production, custom file imports, larger jobs, more complex jobs. And then our internal layout team, our team can handle anything that you have questions about, bigger jobs, more complicated jobs, what product do I use, programs, this sort of thing. So that's kind of, the three options that you have in working with Principal when you have a layout that needs to be done. Okay, so again, quick intro on PowerFlow. So this is just sort of an umbrella name for the technology we came up with, really that has to do with the layout and editing of LEDs. So most functions in the software fall under PowerFlow. Most LED layout functions fall under the umbrella of PowerFlow. and PowerFlow is one of two main operating modes in the software, the other one being the layout tool. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I get into the software. Version 8 adds vector editing to the mix of capabilities that you can do within PowerFlow. And this is a big deal in the software, the way that we did this. And I'll talk more about this, but you can vector edit what we call the vector guide path, the VGP. That's the path that the modules follow. So this is another tool that you have in editing modules and positions of modules, and I'll get into that as well. So that's basically what PowerFlow is about. Underpinning layouts and PowerFlow is of course the density guidelines, and this is very important in the software that that we have complete and accurate density guidelines. And the basic concept, the way to think about a density guideline is, how wide of a stroke does a single run of LEDs cover at a given depth and at a linear spacing value, okay? So you take a module and you say, okay, I have a 6-inch stroke and I have a 4-inch depth. Okay, so I can cover that 6 inches at 4 inches if I lay out a single run of LEDs at 3 per foot or something like that, right? So we have a huge table where every depth and every module and every spacing and all that is covered. So when you go into the software and you have your artwork, when you go into PowerFlow, we're looking up in this table and saying, okay, what is the correct density guidelines? So in some cases, multiple runs might have different stroke coverages. This is true of our products. It's true of our partner, GE Current, who's also on the platform with us. Sometimes we have different coverages, whether it's a single run or double run, and that's in the software. We also have, our stick products, and those can be double-sided, and so there's a lot to the density guidelines. Many factors go into determining these. At the end of the day, we're in our lab and we're making layouts and we're measuring the brightness and making sure that that the lighting is consistent. Density guidelines, you want the lighting to be even and you want it to have a sufficient brightness, and those aren't always congruent things, right? It's not, sometimes it might be even and not be bright enough. Other times it's too bright or something. So it's tricky to get the density guidelines right. And I think the final point here is important, that can you diverge from the density guidelines? Absolutely you can. And there are a lot of cases where you might stray from the density guidelines, but at least we want to present the starting point of the guidelines. And if you determine that it needs to be brighter, or you determine that maybe it doesn't have to be as bright, or that there's some exception, then of course you can you can change the guidelines and do your particular layout in a different way. And of course that's possible in LED Wizard 8. So one final thought before I get into the PowerFlow property bar, which is what I call artwork organization. And it's important that when you go into PowerFlow with your artwork, that you have it organized in a way that makes sense for the layout that you're trying to create and the modules that you're using. So on my big small artwork here, clearly I'm using a different module for big than I am along with some small, right? So I would want to go into PowerFlow with the big letters selected and do that layout based on those parameters. And then I'd go into PowerFlow again on the smaller text and then do that layout with a mini module or something. So so the way that artwork is organized, we have tools for grouping and ungrouping. We have combining and breaking into loops to decompose artwork and recombine artwork and things like that. So that is important. So if you have text and if you have a cabinet, different modules, right? So you want to go into PowerFlow with artwork that is consistent for the module that you're choosing, that you'll get a good layout for that section of artwork with that module. So you want to resist the temptation to just take the entire job and go straight into PowerFlow, because it doesn't really work that way. Okay, so that's artwork organization. Different size, different shape, but artwork should be treated separately. Okay, so this is the PowerFlow property bar, and I'm going to get into the software here in a second. But when you first go into PowerFlow, there's actually 4 ways to do it. And what you're doing is you're starting out in the layout tool with your artwork. Okay, it could be something you imported, it could be text that you entered, right? It could be a combination of these things, but basically you have an object selected, and then you go into PowerFlow. And you can go into PowerFlow by, apologize, you can go into PowerFlow by clicking on the PowerFlow button in the PowerFlow tab, is normally the way that I do it. You can do it through the LED menu, PowerFlow LED tool. You can do it through the icon, the PowerFlow icon in what we call the toolbox down the left side, or you can press F2. Okay, so 4 ways to get into PowerFlow. Remember, PowerFlow is an operating mode, so you go into PowerFlow through one of these mechanisms. Okay, and you have to have something selected to go into PowerFlow. And when you do that, we get the PowerFlow property bar. And here in this slide, I've highlighted some things because there's a lot to this, right? I mean, in general, in LED Wizard, there's a lot to it. So I just want to highlight some things, and I'll show you sort of the procedure here. But the first thing is the new module filtering system. Okay, so right at the top left of the screen, you're going to see various drop-down lists. Okay, the first one is the brand of LED. Okay, it's Principal LED and it's GE Current. These are the 2 brands that are on the platform in the US. The second drop-down list is for the module series. Okay, so modules are organized into a series. We have, the new Patriot series, we have Quick Mod, we have Street Fighter, we have various stick products, right? Single-sided, double-sided. So you pick a module series, and then you optionally pick a color. Some modules are only white, some modules have various colors. Then you pick the depth, and as you go from left to right, we're actually filtering, right? We're filtering the available modules. By the time you pick the depth, which is the supported depths of the series that you selected, then you get to the actual module. And in this case, I have Quick Mod 2, white at 5 inches, just one module will show up here, okay? In some cases, you might have multiple modules that are filtered that you can choose from. And you can also select all. So if you don't know what series you want to use and you do all, then you'll get an enormous drop-down list of different products. But once you've selected that, the next item here is the stroke width, and so when you go into PowerFlow, one of the things that we're doing at that point is measuring the stroke width. So in this example, I've got to work with a 6-inch stroke width, okay? And you can override this if you think that the software didn't properly detect the stroke width or do it at the right place in the letter, for example. You can override with Alt S. And then the orange boxes here, just moving this, the GoToWebinar control panel so I can see this. There are 3 orange boxes selected. There's clearance, there's runs, and spacing. And this is, again, this is really what comes out of the density guideline. So if I have a stroke width of 6, I'm going to get 1 run of LEDs. Okay, so clearance in this case is 0. Clearance comes into play when you have 2 or more runs. Okay, clearance off of the return. How far off of the return is that first run going to be? But in this case, I have a single run, and my spacing value, this is linear spacing. Okay, this is module to module, actually from the center of one module to the center of the next module, 7 inches. Okay, and that's the maximum spacing for this module. That's a little bit less than 2 per foot. Okay, if this was exactly 6, it would be 2 per foot. So that's basically how the density guideline system works. The other item that's highlighted here is called locked, and this is used in a case where you want to make sure that the settings that you have set up here are used for the whole letter set, and that for each letter we're not necessarily recalculating the stroke. okay? So in some cases, you might have artwork where there's quite a bit of variation in the stroke. And so you might click on locked and say, you know what, I want to use the data from the first letter across the whole letter set. And one of the I think most common uses of locked is, let's say you're doing a halo layout, okay, and you want to have runs just right, an inch off the return, let's say. So you can click on lock, you can set that up on the first letter, click on locked, and then it'll lay out all the letters using those same settings. Because otherwise, when we go into each letter, we're trying to put one run down the middle, or space out 2 runs evenly for backlit. So if you do a halo, then you want to click on lock.
Yeah, we do have 2
Sure, Lauren.
questions.
Okay.
The first is, what if I'm not familiar with all the CCTs? Does that show whether it's 6,500, 7,000, 5,000, etc.?
Yeah, so I think some modules actually do have a color temperature in the color list. I think, and then I think maybe some of them just have white. I'd have to look into that. Sometimes you can get that information from the part number, but we do have that information in the database in terms for each module. I mean, most of our modules are 6,500 or 7,000 for white, but I know that we do have other temperatures. So if there are multiple white temperatures, then those should be in the dropdown as well.
Great. And the second question, are there any plugins of the PowerFlow LED tool for AutoCAD, Corel, and/or Illustrator, or is it only available on LED Wizard?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, it's only available in LED Wizard. We have in the past looked into various plugins and things like that, but we haven't done that technically yet. I mean, again, it is something that we could consider. But if you're using one of those programs as a front-end design program, you should be importing that artwork in, or even copying and pasting through the Windows clipboard as a way to get artwork in. That's the way that most customers do it. Okay, thanks, Lauren. All right, so this is now the PowerFlow tab. Okay, so we have the PowerFlow property bar, and we have the PowerFlow tab, and this is down the right side of the screen. So once you've set up your artwork and you're ready to populate, you want to click on either populate or populate all, and that's the green box here. So this is populate is just for the individual letter that you have selected, or populate all is the whole letter set, right? The whole group, the whole object that you came into PowerFlow with, populate all of those. New guide path is a new button in LED Wizard 8 that if you're changing the settings, so if you're deciding that you want to change something different from what the density guidelines say, then you might have to click on new guide path to regenerate that path. And I'll show you that as well. So sometimes if you change settings, you have to click on that. And we have a couple of other options here that are new, called update vector GP and repop, and these really have to do with again, vector editing of the guide path, and refreshing and redoing the population after you make some changes. So I'll show you that as well. Dynamic is a box that we use to enable scaling. So again, there is the ability in LED Wizard 8 to scale layouts to new sizes, and I'll show you that. And then finally, there's the plus button here is for adding to the population library. The population library is a great productivity tool where if you enter some text using a font, it could be a TrueType font, it could be one of our fonts, you can actually edit the letter to make it perfect the way that you want to lay it out, and then you can add it to the population library. Then this gets saved in the system, such that the next time you go into that particular font and character, then it pulls up the saved version. Okay, so you imagine over time, you do a lot of layouts, you use certain fonts, you like to lay those out in a certain way, certain characters. You can add that to the library and build up the library. Okay, it's a great new tool in LED Wizard 8. So that's the PowerFlow tab. And then I'm not going to talk about this a whole lot today, but further down is some automation. So one of the things we were really pushing in LED Wizard 8 is just productivity and automation. So as part of the population, you can load power supplies, you can merge into a title block, you can automatically add dimensions, and this gets into some other areas again that we'll do in another webinar. But this is a major productivity boost where you can do all these things basically in one step. So at this point, I think I'll go ahead and switch to the software. And I've basically already talked about this. So let me just go to LED Wizard, and this is LED Wizard 8. And so I want to just go through some of the things that that I was just discussing. And so let's say that I type in LED Wizard, and this is Gill Sans Condensed. This is a pretty condensed font. And I typed it in at 50 inches, which is the basic default. So when I when I click on PowerFlow, again, one of the 4 ways that I can click on PowerFlow, the first thing that I see is it does generate a guide path. And I've actually got Quick Mod Mini 1 in here, which is a really small module. So I'm going to change. Again, S&G current are the brands. We have Patriot. We can look at Patriot, our new 24-volt module. So I click on Patriot Medium, and it comes in white. Medium has a depth range of 4 to 6 inches. Okay, so I select 5, and then the module drops down. And there's actually just one module, and so that just drops down. So this is a case where, because I've changed the module now, I'm going to click on New Guide Path, and it's going to recalculate. And now it looks in the density guidelines and says, okay, I just need a single run here. I've got a stroke width of 6.3 inches. I'm going to do a single run, and my spacing is 7 inches. So this is about about 1.8 modules per foot, something like that. Okay, so this is that's how the filtering of modules works, and then that's how, again, those settings that I was showing, that's what those mean. So that's the default, and back over here now in the PowerFlow tab, I would click on Populate All, and so what it does is it goes letter to letter, and it figures out the center of the stroke, and it puts the modules in again at, in this case, a little bit less than 2 per foot. And you know, I think it's a good population. We're clearly seeing some parts that we're going to want to go back in and edit, which is the one of the points of the webinar to show you the process of doing that. So this is a layout that I come up with, and I do want to point out at the top above each letter is a little stat object, and this can be customized. You can have whatever information here. I think there are maybe 5 options on this, but it tells you the letter. It tells you the modules per square foot. Okay, 3.3 modules per square foot. It tells you the linear measurement, 1.8 modules a foot, and it says that I have 9 modules. So the idea with the modules per square foot is that you want those values to be consistent across your letter set. Okay, so 3.6, 3.2, a little bit of variation there, but this is a consistent stroke font. These numbers ought to be pretty consistent. Looks like maybe 3.4 is about the average. Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Next to the spacing at the top, what does the OAT stand for?
Oh, OAT, yeah, that's it's one of these obscure ones. This stands for outside angle threshold. And what this means is like on a sharper angle. So let's say that this was actually a double layout, which it's not. This determines when the path rounds off, right? And when it or when it stays as a sharp corner. So I actually like to have this value lower because I think it creates more sharp corners, which are generally better layouts. But that's what that means. So anything above 90 would actually create rounded corners around a 90-degree turn, a 90-degree corner. And again, this really more on double layouts.
Jeff, we also
single.
had a request if you could demo how the mods look for a double row.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. In fact, I will. I'll do that next here. So anyway, so modules per square foot, again, a measurement of brightness consistency, right, across the letters. So so that's what this would look like as again, this particular font as a single. If I'm using control to click and drag to make a bigger. Let's do a double. Let's do a double layout with a if I want to do quite that with a little bit of a thicker, and I'll make this, let's say 72 inches. Make sure we've got something something really thick. And I know that the Patriot module covers a pretty big stroke with a single run. So it looks like we're still, so it's got a 15-inch stroke is still here to single run, but I can knock down the can depth to 4. Okay, now it's showing me a double run. Okay, so so this is what a double run looks like, and the way that that we figure out the spacing on a double run is basically that we take the full stroke width. Okay, in this case 15, and we take 1/4 of the stroke width becomes what we call the clearance. Okay, this value right here, and then the what we call the run gap would be essentially half of the stroke width. So that's our basic math. And if you in PowerFlow, if you do Control Tab, you get this little measuring tool. So this ought to be what, about 7.5. Okay, so that's kind of the math that we use, and that's the default. Now you'll see this red line down here, and that's actually a visual representation of the stroke width. Okay, and you see it on the letters below too. So that is that's the actual stroke width. That represents right there 15 inches. Okay, so that's how we do the spacing. And again, for each letter, it does a calculation of the stroke width. So the D was exactly the same as the L, and the E, if I click on here, 16. So a little bit more. Okay, so that's essentially how it works on a single and double. And again, if you want to change that, right? So you can see that in this case, the 16 inches is probably on this thicker stroke here, but maybe this stroke here, you feel like, well, it's not exactly the same, that same ratio. Then we can edit this and we can make a slight adjustment if you feel that's necessary. Okay, so that's an example of a double, and it would go on to triple and quadruple, et cetera, if you have a really gigantic letter. Okay. Next week, we'll talk about cabinets. We'll do parallel runs and hybrid layouts and all kinds of fun stuff. But that's on cabinets. Okay, so let me talk about now. If there aren't any more questions, I want to go to switch this back. Go to talk about module editing. Now, sometimes when you make a layout, it comes out perfect and there's no editing, and that's wonderful. Sometimes there is editing that's needed, and a lot of times it's very simple. You're moving a module around, you're adding a module here or there, you're readjusting spacing, this kind of thing. So module editing is an important part of PowerFlow. I call it fine-tuning of the layout to get it exactly the way that you want. So there's really two different categories of module editing. There's editing of single modules, where you're acting on one module, you're clicking on a module and you're moving it. And then there's the idea of multiple modules, where you make a selection of modules and you're manipulating multiple modules at the same time. Okay, and that's kind of what you see in this example. I've got these modules highlighted. You can see that they're a little bit more bold, and that means that they're a selection of modules. Okay, so let me get out of this. I just wanted to introduce that concept. So when I zoom in here, you can see that I click on a module and I can slide that module along this guide path. Okay, and on an individual basis, I can do that. And if I move that module too far, meaning beyond the physical limit of the wire, then I get this dotted line. Okay, depending on what mode you're in regarding power supplies, you might get a red wire, and I'll talk about that when we talk about power supplies. But we get this dotted line. That means that you would have to splice that wire. So that's kind of my limit there.
Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
we have a request to show how to obtain power supplies required and overall power requirements, the volts and amps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about that today, but I will say that here in the PowerFlow tab over here, we do have various power supply loading options, and this process is pretty automated in terms of based on one of these options. So I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time if I get into power supply loading, because that's a topic unto itself. So if the person who has the question, if you want to reach out to me directly afterwards, then I'll show it to you. If that's a fair way to do it. And my contact information will be at the end of the slides. But it is, for a letter set like this, it's pretty straightforward to load power supplies. So so in addition to moving a module, I can rotate a module by one of the points on the end of each module. And this being Patriot, this is a single LED module, so module rotation is a little bit less compelling than it might be with a 3 or 4 LED module that's more, that when you rotate it, that it disperses the light a little bit. So maybe not as practical with Patriot. Now, if you want to move, let's go up here to the D. If you want to move off of the guide path, then I have to hold the control key. Okay, so when I hold the control key, I can move the module anywhere. If I release the control key, it snaps to the path that is generated. Okay, so you can see that I've got a little bit of a gap here. And so one option is hold control and move this module here. Okay, now I've created a gap here and an empty space, and you'll notice that as I position the mouse in here, I get a green module. We call it a preview module. In fact, anywhere where I move in PowerFlow here, attached to my mouse position is this preview module. But when I position the preview module on a path that has the dotted line and I click there, it actually inserts a module into that spot. Okay, so that's one way to cover that gap there. Another way is to just position the mouse up there, and again, it's not. I'll hold control because it doesn't quite know where to go. But if I hold control, position, and I click, then it'll put a module there. Okay, so the idea with this preview module is wherever I click on that preview module, it's going to insert a module there. Okay, so that's inserting a module. If I want to delete a module, I just click it and press the delete key. You'll notice that as it deletes, it stays on that path. To then add these back, I can do this kind of manually, right? I can just go along here, try to maintain that same position, and click. And each time I click it, it inserts a module. Okay, so that is what I would call individual module editing. There is another option here, so I might go down here. Let's say that I want my wire to break down here at the bottom, right? I've got my drivers that are coming out of the bottom of my wiring hole down here. So I could go here and hold the mouse here and press the O key. O is for open. And that's a shortcut key because it's where it opens is determined by the position of the mouse. Okay, so I hold the mouse here, I click on O. I'll talk in a minute about shortcut keys and where you find them. So I've opened it there, and now I want to close it up here. And so in order to close a loop, I click on the module, I hold Shift, and then I click on the other module. Okay, so I bridge those two together by doing Shift. Okay, so now I've connected it up here, and I've got the opening down here. And one thing that you'll notice here is that my underlying path is now not really accurate to the layout that I've created. Okay, and so I talked a minute ago about these buttons here. So I'm going to do update vector GP. That means update vector guide path. And when I click on that, it says, oh, there's supposed to be a vector here because that's the position of my module. So it creates that vector, and then it opens it, and it broke this one down here. Okay, so that's kind of the relationship of the underlying path with the position of each LED. So here I might look at this and say, well, I should really have two modules here. So I made that change. That's a pretty easy one. When I look at this this W, and this is always kind of hard, right? When you have this this tight of an angle, do I connect the run? Is the run broken? And so here's a case where I'm going to need to do a little bit of editing. Before I do that, let me go back. Apologize, getting out of order here. Let me go back to the D because I do want to talk about selections of modules before I go to edit that W. So you notice that I was individually moving LEDs, and I'm moving LEDs around one at a time, and that's okay if there's just a little thing that you want to fix. But what if I want to make a change to this whole run, right? And I want to put more modules, or I want to rotate the whole run, or something like that. Then we use what's called a selection. And to create a selection, I click on the end module, and then I hold Shift, and I click on the other end, and I click. All right, that's now my selection. Okay, once I have a selection of modules, there's all kinds of stuff that I can do in terms of editing. All right, so one of the main things that you want to do with a selection of modules is you want to make sure that the spacing is really even. In this case, it is. This was a pretty good layout. The spacing's real even, but I have a set of icons up here that I have access to. And just for fun, let me just make a couple adjustments. So I'm going to change the spacing, reselect this, and now you can see that I don't have good even spacing. And I can click on this icon called uniform spacing, right? And that shifts it back and makes sure that all that spacing is consistent. It's also possible to add or subtract modules out of a selection, and that's also a very common thing to do with a selection. So if I wanted to insert a module into this selection, I can click on this icon, and notice the shortcut key is W. So this is a good tool to use the shortcut key. When I'm editing, I keep my left hand on W, E, and R, which I'm showing you now. Shift and Control. I kind of have all those buttons up that I can quickly access. So I can insert modules, and each time I click, it inserts one module. and automatically respaces. And then if I click on this icon here, it does the opposite, right? It takes a module out and automatically respaces. Now, if I take this too far and I take out too many modules, now I see a bunch of these dotted lines. Okay, I've just removed too many modules, and now those wires won't reach. So I at least have to go back one step, okay, and add that module back in. So, this is an easy way if you want to, to make the population a little bit brighter. Now, if you wanted the whole letter set to be brighter, then you would just adjust the spacing value right up front when you make the population. So if I change this to 6 because I want 2 per foot, or 4.8 because I want 2.5 per foot, I would do that right up front in the population, and all the letters would populate with that same spacing. So that's really a better way to do it. Okay, but that's a selection of modules. You can also rotate. When I have a selection, if I'm rotating, it rotates all of them. Again, not a whole good reason to do that with Patriot, but that's that's rotation. Okay. So that's essentially what I wanted to show with select. Those are the most common things to do with the selection. W, E, and R. Okay, now I'm doing it on the keyboard. I'm just touching keys, W, E, and R. E is just for respacing. Okay, so a very quick and very easy way to do a little bit of fine tuning on the layout. In fact, if I click here, this looks to me like I've got a couple of wires there. So, and I'll tell you another little shortcut here, which is if you have a consistent run that doesn't go around any sharp corners, I don't actually have to select both ends like I showed you. I can just click somewhere and then I can do W, and then that inserted one module. So that's a little bit of a shortcut. Okay, so that's some basic module editing, moving on and off a guide path, adjusting positions, opening, closing loops, that sort of thing. The W here is a little bit more challenging, and I want to show the next step of this, which is editing of the underlying vector guide path. And I think this is a good example to show that. So I could use the same tools that I was just describing. I could put a module out here. I can move this up here. But the other approach to doing this is actually to go into the vector edit tool. Okay, now I can use my vector editing tools directly on this path. And if you think if some of you are new to the software coming in here and you have a background in some of the programs that were mentioned before, Illustrator, AutoCAD, CorelDRAW, these are all vector-based programs. So if you're new to the software and you prefer to operate in a vector world, then you can just click and drag this endpoint. I move that up. Click and drag this down to fill in that gap a little bit. And now I would go over here and I would say repop. Okay, so this is kind of the opposite of what I did here. Repop says, take that new path and repopulate my modules to that path. Okay, it doesn't happen automatically because there's too many refreshes as you're editing. So we ask you to make the edit and then click on repop. Okay. And I thought about it for this little case here. So here's a case where this run tried to sort of split the difference as these two strokes came together. And really, I don't want to do that in this case. I'd like it just to be straight. So here's a couple Bezier curves. I can delete that point entirely. If you're a previous user of our software, you know about the vector editing pop-up menu. So if you double click on a vector, you get this little menu. And I want to say to line, right? So I'm gonna make this into a straight line. Actually, there's a little jog there at the bottom. So here's my straight line. And again, I'll do repop, get that on there, bring this guy down. So you don't have to do repop all of the time. You could do it once at the end after you've sort of edited. But you know, I would do something like that, right? You probably don't need 2 modules coming into a corner that sharp. So that's an example of using vector editing tools. So really, you can operate in PowerFlow if you're comfortable with those tools of just moving modules around, or you can operate in a vector editing world where you're actually editing those vectors and then having those modules match up. All right, so that's some of the basic editing that I would do. Do this one more time, bring this up, and what I want to do here, oh, there's an extra line there, I don't need that, delete that out. What I want to do is I'm preparing this this layout here to show you how the scaling tools work. And the scaling tools are a really fantastic part of the software where you can take this layout and we're going to scale it up to a larger size.
Jeff, one question.
Sure.
Will it auto-flow around mounting points if they're in the artwork that you import?
No, it's really better to add your mounting holes and your wiring holes after you populate. If you have those in your artwork at the beginning and you break into loops and you don't include that artwork when you populate, then that's okay. It would just sort of populate on top of them. But the workflow that I always suggest is, you know, get the LEDs where you want them first, and then figure out where you want the rest of the holes to go. And we have a tool for that, and we'll talk about that when we do the production edition in a few weeks. We have a mounting holes tool and a wiring holes tool, but I think it's better to have the artwork be clean without that stuff when you go into PowerFlow. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let's say that this is my artwork. This is my finished. And I'm going to go in here and I want to scale this and I want to make some new sizes. And this is kind of the punchline for the concept of the vector paths and getting this to be really clean artwork. Because what we do is we scale this to new sizes, and we use that vector guide path in order to do that. So I'm going to take this and I've added what we call reference guidelines, and those go at the top and the bottom. And you can see that it says current size 50.01. That's pretty close. So I'm actually going to go. I'm going to go up. So let's do 60, 72, 84, and 96. And I have some slides for this that I'm kind of skipping over, but the idea here is, let's say that you have this artwork and you have a program, or you have multiple locations, or you have a front and a side of a building, what have you, and you need to make additional sizes of this. So I take this initial layout and I clean this up and I make this really, you know, good, clean, you know, covering everything the way that I think it should be done. And then I go and I make these additional sizes. So I add all of these, I click on dupe and scale, and now it copies these and it repopulates and scales this up to each size. And so again, if you're familiar, if you used LED Wizard 7 before, you know that what I just did saved you several hours. But previously you would have to start over with each size, right? Now you can make one size and you can scale up. And even at this bigger size, I've got a stroke width, you can see here, of 12 inches. I'm still well within a single run for the Patriot Medium module. Okay, but look how clean and consistent this is. It follows the exact same path as I did on this guy down here. Okay, so I scaled those up. You could also scale them down. Now, if I got to the point where this was so big that it goes to a double module, then it would actually automatically do that. And let's see if we can get that to happen. Now, in addition to the scale tab, I can also just scale this graphically, right? Oh, okay. And now we're switching to a double. So whatever stroke width I did here, it's now a double. And maybe I'm right on the edge because I have singles and doubles, right? So see how I did that spacing. So I didn't have to go back in and really do anything. You can see actually that the W stroke width is a little bit smaller, right? So that's probably about right. I'm probably right on the edge. Let me go a little bit bigger. And even though the spacing's the same, it's now switching it. I think the W will go to a double run now. So this is part of the scale tool, and each time that it scales to a new size, it reads that the new stroke width. It says, okay, do I need a single? Do I need a double? And here's an example, guys, about what the outside angle threshold is, OAT. It's rounding off here. Okay, so if I had that OAT value lower, like 20 or 25 or something, these would be sharper corners. So that's just kind of a design, a design thing.
Jeff, where does it show the new size?
Where does it show the new size? If I have it grouped, then it's going to show it right here. This is the height. Because I graphically did it, that's a little bit obscure. But let's say that I, it's supposed to be exactly 150. So I can type in a value. What happened there? I can type in a value directly, and it'll scale it to that size. Okay, it took a little break there. So that's 150. So I scaled it to a numerical size, and that's the way I should have done it, because I don't know that many LED channel letters that you're graphically scaling, that you have that kind of design latitude. It's always sort of predefined, so you can type in a value there. Okay, so that's scaling. Let me just go back here, because I'm afraid that running out of time, I might have missed a couple things. So this is what I was talking about, vector guide path editing, editing the vectors. This is the scaling tool, as I mentioned. So 3 options for scaling. Make that master layout as clean as possible as your original to scale from. And remember to add those reference guidelines, as I did. And the reference guidelines are critical, because you want to make sure that you're measuring the height correctly, right? So, we always think of letter height as the square cap height, right? We don't think of letter height as the O or the S or a round capital. And so that's why you want to make sure you use the reference guidelines so you're measuring correctly as to the letter size. So again, here's an example. We've seen internally and within Principal LED enormous productivity benefit of the scale tool, especially for large programs, jobs that have multiple sizes. What I would do after this, if these were all different sizes, I'd group each of these. I'd copy, paste this into a new layout, Control C, new layout, paste that in. And now I would load power supplies, merge this into a title block, and that would be the size, the file for that size. Okay. So anyway, scale tool, play with that. A lot of fun and a lot of productivity packed into that. Before I finish, I did want to just mention in terms of module editing, if you go into the modify menu, there's all kinds of stuff here, and I only gave a few minutes, but there's rotation options. These are all the density adjustments that I was talking about. You can mirror an object back and forth. You can open and break runs like I was showing you. You can convert a run to a straight line. You can shift a run in and out from the return. Let's say you have a variable stroke. You can make a selection. You can shift in and out. You can center runs in a stroke. So all kinds of stuff here, and some of this you just just go into PowerFlow and experiment. But really, it's a very visual task here. You just want to make sure everything's even. If you need to edit, for the most part, you just click on something and move it. It's pretty straightforward. So let's see. Troubleshooting. There are different things that can happen when you go into PowerFlow. You might have a letter that is a letter that's entirely skipped, or you might have missing sections, like a section or a serif or something like that. And that's it's pretty easy really to handle that. I mean, if I clear this and I also clear the guide path out of there, right? So I see this little path here, and if if I don't like that path, or a module doesn't come through for some reason, I can click and drag on that path, and it's going to populate, and it snaps to that path. If I don't like that path and I want to do it manually, I'm holding the control key. And even that, it was all jiggly, and it still looks pretty good, right? Holding the control key. So you might have like a script letters or something that just the path doesn't look very clean. You can manually draw in there. Okay, and in fact, you can always just click and drag on a path and put in modules, and it'll understand the correct linear spacing when you do that. Excuse me. So there are options. You don't always have to use the automatic tool. There are some cases where, again, text is welded, or it's a script or something, and visually you can sort of see the way you want it, but the path isn't quite showing it that way. Then you can draw that in there. I mean, there are cases you might go here, and you might say, I'm holding control, and I want to connect it there, right? Or I want to come through and I want to connect, this way for some reason. Maybe this has to do with, how I'm going to load the power supplies or something, right? So, you have more customized control if you just do it manually. And then in a case like this, I could E for respace, for example, and sort of clean that up. So there's a lot of flexibility. I think you always want to start with the automated option if you can, and then if you need to, then you can do it as a more manual approach. Inconsistent modules per foot, again, respacing, right? If you have something that's again a variable stroke, maybe on the thicker part, you want to put a few more modules in that section. Maybe you want to rotate modules through that section, to be consistent. So that's something that you can do. So we're about out of time. I felt like I was rushing. There's always so much to talk about. If there's any further questions, and if folks want to stay on, I'm happy to stay on here as long as you want. I did want to indicate here the upcoming webinar schedule. So next week we'll be doing sign cabinets. There's a lot of great stuff on cabinet layouts, not just rectangles, but different shapes, cloud signs. We have a lot of different layout options. File import data cleanup, April 15th. That's a really good training as well. There's all kinds of files that find their way into LED Wizard, and we need to be able to handle those files, provide tools for cleanup and some different options for laying out. So that's a good one. And of course, production edition. We've already talked about bounding holes. We have a router layer that we create that you can export, send to your router. We can export files to your automated bending machine, or create a pattern for manually bending your returns. So there's quite a bit in the production edition as well. And so that's on April 22nd.
And Jeff, just to comment on that, you will receive all of these links in the follow-up email after today's webinar. So if you want to register for any of the others, those links are coming to you. Don't feel like you have to jot these down. We will send them over.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, a lot of ways to get the URL wrong, just copying that. Yeah, so those will be sent to you. So here's the final slide. You know, my my email address is here. We're out here in California, lockdown out here in California. I'm in my office today. I'm the only one here, but this is how you can reach me. And again, I'll stay on if there's more questions, or if you have a follow-up that you want to ask me afterwards, then that's great too. If there's any questions, I don't mind if, Lauren, if you want to open up the audio to everybody, they can just ask directly instead of having to put it through the chat window. Is that possible to do?
I can't open up everyone's audio, so you'll have to send them in through the chat window. Sorry.
Okay.
I know, Jeff, that there were still a few questions about the power supplies and loading. Would you mind staying on and talking through
Sure.
some
Yeah,
of that
absolutely.
with folks?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if there's nothing else that's pertinent to the rest of the stuff that I covered, now that I look at the schedule, we don't have a specific power supply lesson yet. I suppose we could add one, but I'll go ahead and go through on this layout what some of the power supply loading options are, if that's something that everybody wants to see. So power supply loading, there are multiple ways to do it. And again, I think the automated tools really are going to be the best. So when you have your layout finished, and this is actually a case where I'm doing this outside of PowerFlow. It's one of the few things that we can do outside of PowerFlow, and mainly that's because with the layout tool, I can select exactly the objects that I want to load onto my power supply. So again, if I had a cabinet and I had some channel letters both on the layout, maybe I'd say, you know, I need a 24-volt driver for the sticks in the cabinet, and maybe I need a 12 for the modules or something like that. So that's kind of why we do it that way. So I'm in here. I've got my my population, and here in this drop-down list, again, this is, you know, I think the fastest way to do is we have different options, and I'll just explain. So one per letter would be self-contained drivers for each letter. Okay. Before I do that, so let me go down here. So I've got this was Patriot. So we have the 96 watt 24-volt driver that we use for Patriot. Okay, so and that driver is already selected here. So there are the options of all of our drivers that are in this list. So the first thing really, I guess I should say to do is pick the driver that you want. So one per letter, self-contained, one for all letters. Okay, so if you have a small letter set or a small job, then you just want to put those all on one driver, you would select this one. Optimal by letter, which is actually normally what I like to do for channel letters. So this will load each letter, and it will keep, you know, it's not gonna split a letter, right? It's not gonna load half the letter on one driver and half the letter on another driver. Keep them all together. So it just starts left to right, and it loads until the driver gets full, and then it adds another one, and then it keeps loading. Okay, so that's probably, in this case, the one that I'll choose. Excuse me, optimal by run. So you'll notice that, like on the W, for example, this is actually 4 runs, right? These are not connected. So we could either show those as splices, or we would just leave it like this, and it would be 4 runs. So optimal by run does have the potential of breaking a letter right into 2 different drivers. And then optimal by modules is the most granular of all the options, in the sense that it will load the first driver to 100% before it moves to another driver. And it will break a run and break a letter as needed in order to do that. So, you know, again, each of these has their, you know, has their spot. I would tend to do optimal by letter for something like this. So once I've selected that, I've got the driver. I click on load. And interestingly enough, we barely went over. Is that right? Let's see. No, I take it back. So we've got actually pretty decent loading. So you can see how the wires come off. And let me just make this a little bit bigger. We can see this a little bit better. So I've got the first 5 letters on the first driver. Remember that we load our drivers to 100%. So I've got 96.7. I've got 92, almost 93 watts on the first driver, and then 99 modules on the second driver. And remember, of course, too, that we have smart packaging, so you will get a driver with the bag. And I'm not sure what the maximum is, just a couple more than this, maybe 118 or something like that. 120 it might be for this module. Okay, so that's the simplest way. You can position this wherever you want to. I tend to like to have them at the bottom. Other people will put them at the top or off to the side. That's completely up to you. When we talk about cabinets, then in stick products, it's just sort of stick by stick we'll load. So, and then if you wanted to adjust this and change and say, well, I want these letters on this driver and these other letters on the other driver, you can edit and change that. Up here in the summary tab, it will show you exactly the watts per letter and the total watts. So I could have looked at this ahead of time and said, okay, I've got 172 watts. I know that'll fit on 2 96-watt drivers, no problem, right? So sometimes I've seen users, and we do this internally, you take a peek at this first and you figure out, okay, here are my total watts, and okay, what driver would I choose in this case, right? If this were 60-watt drivers, right, then I'd have 3 of them, 2 120-watt drivers if this was a 12-volt. Anyway, so that's power supply loading. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. There are some, as I said, some additional ways and additional things you can do, but as a quick review in a few minutes, that's the procedure. After this, I would merge into the title block, and again, getting beyond what what I wanted to talk about today, but that's a final step. You merge into the title block, and you all this data comes in, and this is really sort of finishing out the workflow. And I can put dimensions. I forgot that. So there's the dimensions. So I mentioned the idea that you can set up all these things when you do the initial population. So that's something that I could have done, and all of these things would have happened essentially in rapid succession. So let me show you. Do this. I guess I can do this one with the double run. This was the double run example. Let me just go back to 4 inches. So this is Patriot Medium, 4 inches. A 15-inch stroke is coming in at 2 runs. So if I just click these buttons, optimal by letter, the principal landscape, title block, the dimensions. Now when I say populate all, it's going to make the layout, load the power supplies, add the dimensions. Oh, I had the wrong driver selected. So so it did everything except for load the drivers. But the idea is that you would be able to do that essentially all in one step. So let me just pick. No, that seems like that. Not sure why that didn't work. I thought I had the right driver selected. So I just went back and reselected it and redid it. So to sort of bring the full workflow together there, that's a way that that you can do a layout quickly, and a little bit more like how the online tool works, where you just go in there and very quickly get a finished layout. So those are the tools, and I still consider that part of PowerFlow. So you can adjust this, and you can scale the title block up a little bit. You can organize this stuff how you want. So that's in a quick preview. Power supply loading, and then some of the automation that we have for going all the way through a job. Is that for the person who asked about the power supplies? Is that sufficient? Do you want to see anything more regarding power supplies?
Jeff, it sounds like that pretty much covered it. We don't have any questions right now, and I know that we've had folks on for a while. So
Yeah.
if anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to send those to Jeff. Jeff, do you mind just putting your email address back up there on that last slide? And then we hope that you guys will join us next week as we talk about cabinet signs. The registration link again for that webinar will be in the follow-up email, along with a recording of today's webinar, so you can reference the information that was shared.
Terrific. Thanks, Lauren. And thanks, everyone, again. Thanks for joining. Stay safe, stay healthy. If there's any way that we can help, it's a great time, I think, to do this kind of training. You know, I'm available to help on a one-on-one basis. You know, it doesn't have to be in a webinar like this. Just reach out to me. This is what I do. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week, next Wednesday, same time.